welcome to another episode of That's Effing Weird. Alex couldn't make it today, but me and Clark are just gonna move forward with some cryptids, and specifically in wartime.
Yeah, so nothing says stress like being in a war.
Right.
So weird things are going to be found, I think. And this whole episode kind of spawned because we were talking about a video game that's actually coming out in April. Now it's been in the talks for 7 years when the first trailer came out, which is important to the original story here. So keep that date in mind. 7 years ago, that would have been we're looking at 2016 now.
That's like Cyberpunk's development time.
Yeah, seriously. So 2016 is gonna be important for this story, but the video game, no free promotion here, but we're just doing it.
Yeah,
It's called Ad Infinitum, and it's coming out in April, and it is a World War One survival horror game where you play as a German soldier in the trenches, and you're being stalked by a weird monster, and it's also deals with like the PTSD after he comes home. I don't know much more than that. I've only watched some of the gameplay trailers. There's a new one that just came out about a month ago. So they're pretty serious about the release date being April of this year, April 20th to be exact. But I find it fascinating that they started this game in 2016, or at least getting crowdfunding for this game in 2016, because that is where this story first really emerges. And it's the first cryptid we're going to talk about. Now, it kind of falls under the category of maybe urban legend or maybe creepypasta. We don't really know where the origin of this comes from, but there are people that claim they have a letter that was sealed for 100 years by the British government. So the Battle of the Somme kicks off in July of 1916. And it's the worst battle, arguably. Casualty-wise, it is the worst battle of World War One when it's all said and done. But, people can probably argue there's battles that you would rather not be in. But the Somme is particularly bloody in British history because it's basically their antietam. It's their bloodiest single day in American history. The first day of the Somme saw 57,000 British casualties. That's in a single day. So that's the bloodiest day in British history, military history. So it's an important battle. Well, there is a private who wrote a letter in the fall. So this battle goes on for obviously a few months. It goes on through the rest of the year, basically, of 1916. At the beginning of the fall, a private named Alfred James Lewis, I believe is his name, writes a letter home, and it gets picked up by the censors because all letters, all correspondence going home has to be censored. And if it gives away any positions or things like that, or any, sensitive information, they have to take it, and basically they can't send it home. So this letter ends up in the Imperial War Museum in England, and it's sealed for 100 years. So it was finally released in 2016. That's where that year becomes important again. And once again, we don't know if there is this letter, there's pictures of this letter, but it's so hard to find any concrete evidence about this story. It's very hard to research. You can't just do an easy Google search, put it that way. So the story goes that they find this letter, they unseal it, they open it up, and they, finally release it to the public. And this private talks about being on the trenches of the Somme in the beginning of the fall of the battle, and looking across, no man's land. They start hearing a commotion coming from the German trenches. And their commander, in a panic, says to shoot up flares. They think an attack is coming. So better safe than sorry, they start shooting up flares to light up no man's land to see if troops are coming over or not. Well, when they shoot up the flares, they don't see any troops coming over. They just see panic, and they see people running in the German trenches, and they see this weird cloud creature. So this is all in the letter that this Private Lewis wrote back to his parents, that he saw something that looked like a twisted mat, almost like a cloud, like going over itself, but it had limbs. It had very recognizable limbs. Like it had arms and legs, but it was a cloud, like a twisting cloud. And
Ooh, I'm getting Lost vibes.
yeah, the smoke monster from Lost is exactly what I thought of when I first heard this story. Um, so I'm glad you actually brought that up because that's the only thing I can kind of compare it to,
Yeah.
mentally at least. So, um, Private goes on to say that they're all kind of frozen. They're looking, they're at their posts, watching what's going on. Because you got to remember, the trenches are about 200 meters from each other. So that's 180 yards, 170 yards, give or take. So they're very close. And this is just how warfare on the Western Front was. So they can kind of see and hear what's going on. And every time they shoot up the flares, they kind of catch this monster snatching people out of the trench and literally like popping them, like pulling them apart, ripping arms off, ripping legs off, ripping them apart at the torso. And it says that at some point it looked like it was maybe consuming the torsos or it was just throwing them away. They're not sure, but it's just decimating these German troops. And there's just panic. And they said the sound was terrible. They could hear the popping of and like tearing of flesh and stuff. So they just kind of hunker down and are shooting flares and seeing what's going on. And that's essentially how his letter ends. It goes, that's basically all it really entails. Now, on the flip side, because this letter came out, people started wanting to look at German records. And they found some German reports from around the same time at the same area. And they were a lot more short and to the point. And some of them said, we were beset upon by a monster. Like that was a report just for one night. Like, they had the date, all this stuff, and it was a report. We were beset upon by a monster. Casualties uncertain. We couldn't clean up the bodies. Yada yada yada. That was literally like all the details they basically gave. So that's the basis of this possible urban legend, possible creepypasta, possible real monster sighting, possible psychosis episode. Who knows? So
Yeah.
But yeah, and it obviously inspired this video game, which I'm excited to play because I would love to play. I'm obsessed with World War One, by the way. As a military historian, World War One fascinates me. It's the closest.
It doesn't get as much press as the second.
It doesn't, and it should because it's so historically important, and two, it's so close to like steampunk that we've ever gotten. Like,
yeah.
this stuff is crazy. What was invented during World War One? Like, it's really one of those times where the industrial age had outran our own logic and our own science and our own, like, even medicine. Obviously, it was just crazy to think we were able to build killing machines better than we were able to rationalize our own like logic. So it's such a wild war.
Because we didn't even have penicillin yet.
No, I guess
that was too
long after it. Yeah.
We create war machines, but we haven't mastered antibiotics quite yet.
Oh. He said it's a fascinating war.
Yeah. So, but basically, the cryptid story. I mean, you do have somewhat. You got documents from the British and the Germans, right?
Yeah. Now the German ones, I haven't heard any like deep like proof on where they were like drawn from. The British ones are claimed to have come from the Imperial War Museum and have been buried there under Section H, which Section H is basically like their X-Files, I guess.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, as deep as you could bury them, and they were buried for 100 years. So it's kind of interesting. This came out in 2016, and the Battle of the Somme was in 1916. So it makes sense. It was buried for 100 years, and then they were declassified. So, and it's take it, for what you will.
I mean, that's good enough for me. I mean, at least we got, it's like, I'll say 1.5 sources. Are you aware of any, what before the British document, was any of this, like hearsay? What was there like, urban legend amongst troops that like kind of passed down verbally?
So not amongst the troops, but the area of the Somme battlefield where they were. Now the Somme is a river, so a
Hmm.
lot of these battles are named after rivers and everything. There was a village in the area where they were, where this front was, where this happened. And I mean, obviously the front is long; it's miles long. But in this particular section where this battalion of Fusiliers were, where this was reported at, there was a village from the 1600s that was abandoned, and there is a museum for the whole area uh, on this place. And not only does it talk about the Battle of the Somme, but it actually has like the whole area of this place. And there's a wood cutting in the museum from this, like I think it dates back to the 1600s. I'm not sure. I think it's early 1600s, early to mid. And in the wood cutting, there's actually like a swirling looking like cut, and there's people and there's a town, and there are basically the translation in French would have been like Middle French at this time. Basically says something along the lines of like the shapeshifter attacked again. The village is abandoned.
That is crazy.
So there's like rumors that there was a village in that area that had to be abandoned because this some shape-shifting creature kept like attacking and killing all the children and things like that. So it was a rumored demon in the area, uh but nobody I guess inhabited that. Like I guess they abandoned that village, and then next thing you know you have this account from World War One. So 300 years later.
That's still like I really like that. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of I was this channel Mysterious, shout out Mysterious Middle East. Love to have you on the podcast. But they made a little mini documentary on this one specific creature that it was humanoid. It wasn't smoke or anything. It was humanoid, but it was in the Middle East. I want to say it was somewhere in Afghanistan, and they said it was a specific kind of jinn for that region, and that soldiers from several different, like there was a town, and the townspeople always knew to go in after a certain time of day, and when there were soldiers occupying, I forget which war this was. I'm terrible with this. But when soldiers were occupying, there were several people that were like kind of like what you were describing, like they were taken or ripped apart, like that. They were attacked by these things that would stay still and then move in like closer to them. They were like watching or whatever. But it was this long thing. I should watch it again and talk about it. But it's very similar to what you're talking about. I don't, I mean, from someone rationally looking at this, I don't know what people are thinking if they're going like, well, maybe it's like nerves from war and lack of sleep and low provisions. But it's weird that like this same kind of thing crops up throughout different timelines of like their soldiers, and then something preys on them and it's never caught or found, or I don't know. This is just like imagination fuel for me. I love it.
Yeah, the Predator story.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think
Aren't
that's the
they
thing.
I watched the new Predator, which is actually pretty good.
Yeah, but I think I think for any military unit, it's got to be like an ultimate boogeyman thing. It's because you're trained and you're like, you're supposed to be like the ultimate badass. You have the best equipment. You're going into a foreign place and you don't know where you are. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah. Well,
and
there was a in Vietnam, there was like there was a story which Neil Blomkamp made a short Oats studio movie about this creature that was essentially doing the same thing, but it was like a guy that in Blomkamp's story, it was a guy that was filled with so much grief because he lost his family through just people indiscriminate killing in this village, and he kind of like transcended reality and then started walking around. But there was like a local legend about this river and this same kind of thing, and then he became that legend and then was tearing through American troops, and they had to like isolate him and study him and stuff, and then he wound up killing all of them. But yeah, same kind of thing. These wartime stories of like just one creature that's like completely mysterious and unknown, like wreaking havoc.
Well, it's interesting to bring up Vietnam because I've got two from Vietnam now.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I'm going to do the first one because you kind of mentioned, you kind of led into this. So the first one's not as compelling because there's less evidence of it, or less stories, I guess. But a lot of night patrols in Vietnam would claim that they saw a creature that would jump from the trees, like limb to limb in the jungle and everything, and it had bat wings, and it was distinctly feminine, so they called it the Bat Witch. And I don't actually have the Vietnamese word for it, but locals kind of confirmed or whatever that like there were certain places in the jungle that the Viet Cong wouldn't go into at night for that purpose because this creature apparently like stalked above you. And so it's kind of strange. It's almost like a Mothman, but it's like a
yeah.
bat.
Oh man, I loved the first Mothman movie. So good.
Yeah, that's a good movie.
It's hello, John Clyde. Just so, it's no, there's no jump scares. It's just unnerving the whole way through.
Yeah, I always like doing this voice. I just want to call people all the time and be like, "Great tragedy on deal."
I know. I wish I had like a voice changer that could do that live.
Oh man. So that's the first one I want to bring up, but the second one I've got a lot more info on. And this one's probably a lot more well known. So it starts with an American patrol that's out that gets into a firefight at dusk with a Viet Cong unit, and during the firefight, they see some kind of creature. It's ape-like. It has kind of dark black and like reddish brown fur, and it rushes at the American troops. Like it's apparently it's getting so dark to where the only thing they can really see is like the muzzle flashes and stuff. So they're trying not to give their position away, but this thing rushes them and they have to open fire on it. So they open fire, and this thing is incredibly aggressive, and they hit it enough times to where I guess it backs off and runs away, and it goes back towards the Viet Cong, and then they start hearing the Viet Cong screaming out a word over and over again, and the Viet Cong retreat. So they're like, okay, well, we just saw a wild animal and then heard a bunch of stuff, and then all of a sudden the Viet Cong retreated. So we don't know what that is. They go back and they report and all this stuff, and they try to figure out, and eventually they talk to some locals, and the locals say, oh, you ran into the Batutu. And that's the word for it. What the Americans eventually call it is the rock ape, because they will come in contact with it again and again and again after this. So this is a large primate, not large as Bigfoot, but like 6 foot tall. So think of, average male size, basically.
Hyper aggressive.
Yep, hyper aggressive, which is not Bigfoot in North America.
Yeah.
We're used to being shy or being kind of reserved. This is hyper aggressive, 6 foot tall. The reason they called them rock apes is because their preferred method of aggression would be to throw rocks at American troops. These things were so commonly seen that one hill in one of the patrol areas was named Monkey Hill, because if you wanted to find them, like, you almost certainly could go there and they would be there. And this is like reported with so many troops. And then obviously locals and on the Viet Cong side, they would say, yeah, you don't want to mess with these things. If they get close to you, they're going to tear you apart.
Dude, where do you fall on the whole Bigfoot? Because this does kind of lean into like Bigfoot. Like, do you think it's plausible to say that there is a extinct or close to extinct primate line that fits these descriptions? Because they're all over the place. You got like the Yeti, this kind of thing. You got the North American Bigfoot, and there's several cultures that have these. I remember my science teacher saying that, well, like if you go like, okay, from like Nebraska all the way through the wilderness up into Canada and Alaska and stuff, there's just so many square miles of just undeveloped, just, forest and essentially jungle. I mean, there's a possibility that there's like a couple, like, very close to extinct primates that are fit these descriptions. But I don't know. I think that when I hear something repeated constantly, there might be something there. Like those videos where hunters will just hear these it's not a coyote, it's not a fox, it's not a this, it's just crazy screams out in the middle of nowhere, and it clearly freaks them out. It's not some janky footage of something back in the woods or whatever. Like I have a feeling there might be stuff that probably eludes us. I don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely and beyond saying the word cryptid, there's actually species that we just don't know. We just haven't found. They're so rare, and you just don't come across them. The Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Yowie, that's what Australians call it. Yeti, wherever it is, it being so widespread, it's similar to like the tales of dragons.
Yeah.
It has to have something, whether it be like something we've all seen through the historical record that we've kind of agreed upon, like that's the story we've all just landed on, or if there is an actual animal out there. I find fascinating too. I'm just going to narrow down in North America because we live both in North America. So, regionally, how it changes, I find fascinating. So, obviously, indigenous Native Americans have been telling stories about this before even Europeans landed here. But now, even in modern day, when people say like in Florida, they call it the skunk ape in Florida. And the way they describe it, the way its hair is thinner and it's redder and things like that, versus in the Pacific Northwest, it's seen as taller, a little bigger and darker hair and thicker fur and things like that. Those are like evolutionary traits that something would have. If that makes sense, you know what I mean? Like
yeah, it's a hotter, more humid climate.
Think about the deer in the Southeast versus the deer in even like Maine.
Yeah.
Because of the climate, because of they're much smaller. Mammals are smaller in the South, in the Southeast. That's just how they grow. They have other predators to deal with, mostly reptiles, insects, diseases, other things that they don't have to deal with up in like Maine. So you have 200, 230, 240 pound deer in Maine, and you come down to the Southeast and, your white-tailed deer are 150 pounds. A 200-pound deer is a big deer in the South. It's not. It's a small deer up north.
Yeah.
And I find that fascinating. Is like we think of Bigfoot as maybe being like one single thing all across the board, and no, technically you would think the way the sightings are kind of makes sense. The way you see it in Arkansas, the way you see it in like the hills of Tennessee, the way you see it in Florida versus what you see in the Pacific Northwest. I find that fascinating because the descriptions are similar, but just different enough where I'm like, you know what? That kind of makes sense. Like something would grow bigger up there. Something would have darker fur. Something would have thicker fur. Something would be more water repellent. The same way dogs, kind of when not force bred, but like natural dog breeds that have grown in certain areas of the world, the way they develop. That's what Bigfoot would do as well, technically. So just food for thought.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like there's. You know how there in humans there's psychosis, there's schizophrenia, there's all these different mental disorders we've classified because it's our best interest to classify them. But like, what if there is what if the things in Vietnam are just like psychotic orangutans?
It's kind of funny because orangutans were indigenous to that area, but not for 1,000 years until that. So they had been up to that point. There had not been orangutans in Vietnam for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
So, the only native monkeys to that area were gibbons, and gibbons are about 20 pounds. They're tiny.
Yeah, they're tiny little guys. Yeah, they're cute too. Yeah, I was watching a video the other day of an orangutan breaking open nuts and using a rock as a hammer and showing the other monkeys, and they were just like watching, and it's creepy because there's more like reports of them using sticks to catch fish and stuff like that. There's photos of not specifically orangutans, but more chimpanzees using sticks. and figuring out how to use basic tools. That kind of stuff I find fascinating, like the where they've done experiments where they'll teach a monkey how to open a coconut on an island where they don't understand what to do with coconuts, and then that information spreads among them, and then they utilize them, and this is all documented. But yeah, it's weird, and I think there are, man, what I think the most where people doubt are, they're like, okay, we got satellites everywhere, we've mapped and charted everything, like why haven't we just have a Bigfoot body in front of us or something like that? But if you think about like the vastness of some wilderness out there, where where you go into the Marianas Trench, or you have like these big oil rigs that are drilling and stuff like that, and then we find these crazy stuff we had absolutely no idea existed, like recently within this decade. We've caught them on video, and they're insane looking things that are like alien, but like translate that to like the continents, and if something is endangered or on the brink of extinction, like I feel like there could be a very, very intelligent primate, lineage that is just kind of like learn to like be like evasive. And then you have the other reason people are like really skeptical is there's been enough pranksters and people wanting attention to fabricate evidence, which just keeps adding to the doubt. But if you think about it could, I don't know, to me it makes sense. I'm not saying the traditional Bigfoot's just out there roaming around, but there could be something close to it that fits all these descriptions. Man, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, you don't like it. It's hard to believe. In, I don't know. And maybe this is just American pride. It's hard to believe in like modern North America. It's like, oh, we would have found something by now. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I mean, yeah, I mean, the North American continent's huge.
Yeah. I went hiking in where North Carolina and like Tennessee kind of meet. Like when you're out on those parks, when you're on foot, where you don't have vehicles to just like traverse tons of land. When you're on foot and you get up on the hills and like look at how vast it just keeps going and going and going, there's a reason people disappear in parks. Like, I mean, it's like the most beautiful places I've seen, but at the same time, they're so vast. I've just seen enough to where like I could at least put it on the back burner that something like that is out there and evasive, but I don't know. One day I do want to talk about all the 411 missing persons in parks. That just leads right into that is so creepy. And then all the adjacent like tunnel systems that we have all over North America that I don't feel like as many people are aware of as they should, but there's like old train systems and tunnels and mine systems and just tunnels all over the place that have been bored throughout the decades where I don't know, it's just more mystery.
And there's I mean, that just made me think about the one in Russia, the what do they call it, Railway 3 or whatever, the one that's Stalin wanted for his like escape if he needed to, and like now it's just not abandoned, but I guess like only higher echelon people know about, and it's like this whole railway system that's for the higher ups to escape if they need to.
Oh, I don't doubt it at all. I mean, if you just look at the catacomb systems in France, they're ridiculous. It's like a complete, it's like the underworld. Like there's mazes of miles and miles and miles of tunnel systems, and then the other thing is like it's France, so it's a lot easier to see and understand how vast those networks are. But what I'm interested in is all the old tunnel systems in old Russia, because they also have a ridiculous amount of subterranean systems. And since the way that country runs, you don't see it as much. They're not as transparent. But man, I would love I would love. One of my favorite stories is like I think I mentioned it to you a long time ago. Like one of the czars getting stuff that was preserved from the Library of Alexandria and getting it like eventually a small cache of scrolls and stuff were given to one of the czars before all of them fell, and it was like hidden in some of their subterranean stuff. But uh, again, most of my stuff is hit and miss when it comes to factual, but it's at least fun.
Oh yeah, I gotta find a way to put the copper pipes in China in there too. So
Oh wait, whoa! Copper pipes in China.
yeah, you never heard about the copper pipes. So somewhere in I forget which province it is in China, but there's these copper pipes they found that go like deep underground, and
Dude.
And it's in a place where they've never mined, they've never done anything like that, so they don't know why they have these copper pipes. Like, if I mean, it would be it's not even big enough to be ventilation. Like they're not like but 3 inches like wide or whatever. Just just Google copper pipes in China, and you'll
Okay.
go down a
I
whole.
mean, that woman. Do you know that woman that they found that was preserved? Like, she was buried underground in this province that's uh almost more the way it looked on the documentary, it was kind of more tropically. It was more warmer climate, but this woman was preserved. I mean, she looks really gross now, like her skin is like jelly, but she still has skin. And it was some weird preservation method that they used, and in combination with the underground system that they put her in. And then they had this big room full of her dishware and all the stuff she liked in life. And they found her, and they were just astonished at her preservation. They only found one other body that was embalmed similarly, and I think it was a dude, and he was close to that region. But the way they put it was kind of this aristocratic level of people that knew a guy that knew how to do this weird embalming technique, and they've only found a few bodies that have done this. But the lady one was really weird because, I mean, her skin, the subdermal fat layer was still there, but it's gross to look at her, but it's crazy that whatever they did, the skin actually survived. Um, but then when you get into China, then I want to know about those pyramids that the Chinese government have planted trees over. Have you seen these?
Nah, I'd have to take a look at that.
Okay, so I believe it's more northern China, and it's just farmland. It's just desolate farmland. And they are actively farming all around these things, and they are legit human built structures. Now they are very weathered, and there's a lot of dirt layer on top of them, but people showed a lot of interest a few years ago, like tons of interest, and they were Google mapping it, and they were and it got to a point where foreigners were boots on the ground getting into these regions and filming them. They would, and then posting it on YouTube. So the Chinese government responded in their classic way. They decided to plant tons of trees all over them, like saplings, and to where satellites couldn't see them and stuff, which is just a move. It's like, who cares? But it's a move that just fuels conspiracy theorists. So part of it is like, it's like the Tartaria thing, where there were these structures built all over the world, and then it fragmented and then lost to time, kind of stuff. But there are structures that are still there that the Chinese government has planted trees over just to avoid the attention. But that kind of stuff, like ancient stuff in parts of the world where they're not as transparent, it just is, oh man, I can't get enough of it. But I gotta add the copper pipes to the list.
Copper pipes. Also, the missing Ninth Legion.
Missing Ninth Legion.
The Ninth Legion was in that's the one in Scotland. I forget which legion it is. The missing Roman Legion in China is a different one. I can't remember which. I think it's the fourth or something. Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever heard about that one? The missing Roman Legion in China?
No, but wasn't there talks of that? There was a missing legion in Germany. Like old Germany, they went through and were like ambushed in like the woods or something. That's what the legend goes. But that's the only one I'm familiar with.
Ninth Legion, and it was so the missing Ninth Legion is the only one that is historically documented, as we don't know what
Okay.
happened to them.
Okay.
The Ninth Legion went into Scotland. This is when the Scots were the Picts, and basically they went across Hadrian's Wall, and went into Scotland and disappeared. And their banner was taken and all that stuff. And they're actually in the historical record as so. Legions were never restocked. They just it became new legions. So like
Okay.
we know from the record like what happened to each legion. It's like this is the first, second, third, and the Ninth Legion is literally listed as like missing in action, basically according to Roman records.
Whoa.
And nobody
So
knew
there
what
could be
happened.
like a mass grave somewhere over there.
Yeah, somewhere up in Scotland. Either they intermixed, dispersed, they got beat really bad, and then had to flee. Something happened, but like, yeah, there's a couple of theories on that. I could go back into my research on that one. I've talked about it, I think, before in other podcasts and stuff. But
Yeah.
but that's something to talk about too. But there's another missing, and this one isn't like documented as a missing legion because it wasn't so well documented. Like the Ninth Legion was actually like well decorated, so that's why it was such a big deal that it gets like it's missing from the historical record. But there is a legion that went as far like east as they could go, and apparently they say it disappeared into the Gobi Desert.
Okay.
And and they don't know, like I don't know the numbers or anything of like what legion it was, or if it was just one of their actual like elite legions, or if it was just a Roman army thing. But they went into the desert, apparently disappeared, and they just kind of listed it as like, oh yeah, that's one of those historical mysteries where they just disappeared in the desert and they're gone forever. But there are Chinese, like native Chinese in the western provinces of China, west of the Gobi, who have blonde hair and blue eyes, similar to like Roanoke. Similar to like
Yeah, they
Roanoke.
just shacked up. They're like, fuck it, we're not going back.
Yeah, similar to Roanoke, where you mysteriously have Native Americans with blue eyes and blonde
Yeah,
hair.
yeah. Oh
And it's
man, I
and
still
everyone's
want
like,
to.
they disappeared, and it's like really because it seems like they just intermixed and married in and got happy. But
Yeah,
that's what they think happened to these Romans, because there's native Chinese that have genes that are Roman genetics. Basically, they've done like blood tests on them. It's like, oh, you have green eyes. That's because you're from this. Like you have the recessive gene from the Romans here, and like
well, at least they didn't get Dyatlov passed.
yeah.
Like they just didn't. It wasn't something horrible. They just started families.
I mean, could you imagine being that far from Rome too, and then that happened to you? Godly.
I don't. Well, first off, like
Why would you
on
go?
foot navigation, I for like a camping thing I was a part of. They had some people that trained us with compasses and maps and everything, and I was decent at it. Like I could find my way around with a map and a compass. What's crazy is like the amount of space that you're talking about traversed.
Oh yeah,
Like that is like you're on an alien planet at that point. Like to them, like you
like
are so far away that the climate, the geology, and like nothing looks like home, and you're way out there. I would imagine that eventually people would get lost. Like when I hear of people disappearing like that far back, my mind always goes back to like the Franklin expeditions, because that we're closer to that in history and we have documentation and stuff. And sometimes stuff happens, like people get lost, stranded, stuck, and run through their provisions or can't find food or whatever, and it just becomes a nightmare. Like it's creepy, but I mean, you get far away from what you're used to. I could imagine having your compass all turned around. I don't know.
yeah. People don't understand. Like, think modern military right now. You do an 8-month deployment and stuff like that, and that's God bless you for it. But uh, like these people went for like the Persians. Think about like the Persians invading Greece.
Yeah.
That was like a 4-month trek to Greece to fight the war.
Man.
And then you fight the war, and then you've got 4 months back to your home. And then, or
Yeah.
think about Alexander the Great going all the way to India. Years.
That's insane. That's
And
insane.
a 2-year campaign basically to get expand. I mean, It's insane. I mean, yeah, you're not maybe fighting as many battles and stuff like that. You don't have as much resistance there, but you are taken on foot from Macedonia to India over a 2 year like walking or on horse at best. And most of the times you're walking your horse because you can't ride them. You only ride them in battle. So it's like, I mean, just walking the world essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the mindset of like conquests and how like a conquest can be satisfying, but like if someone was like, uh, we could march on foot up to Chicago and like take that over, I'm be like, I don't know. It's a really long way.
That's a long walk. That's over some rough terrain. Like
Yeah, I don't know.
it's
I'm good.
cold. I don't have a
Let's just
good
stay
jacket.
here and develop weapons. We'll be good. As long as we do that, they won't be a threat.
I don't know about you, but it's February and it's 72 out where I live right now. I don't want to go to Chicago.
Right. Oh no. No. I remember being on the Great Lakes once. I was coming back home. So I was like, you know what, I'll check it out. So I went in that like Lincoln Park stretches all the edge of Chicago to the lake. And I stood out there and there were still like, ice this thick and it was in plates that was just like creaking because of all the cracks. And it was like almost like tectonic plates of just ice. And I stood at the edge of the water and took my glove off, and it felt like razor, like X-Acto knives cutting your fingers. When that wind comes off of the lake and just hits you, the chill factor. I don't think I really ever registered how like cold can be out out there. It was unbelievably cold. That was like a new level of cold for my brain. But I put my glove on and got out of there. Took a few pictures. I was like, all right, I'm good. I've seen it.
Definitely glove back on.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine like I mean, you would put and all this traversing, you would have to be extremely aware of weather patterns of like, I'm sure you had guys in your company that were looking at stars and all kinds of stuff to kind of get their take on what it's going to be like wherever you're going when you're going. But man, what a time to be alive.
I mean, you're picking people up along the way. It's adaptability. Like you got to
Yeah.
get the locals, you got to get translators. You forget you don't even speak the language.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
got to
I mean,
find
I
somebody.
respect the hustle, man. Like that's another level.
That's another thing about like studying like colonial Latin America blows my mind. People think like the conquistadors just land and like walk in and do stuff, and it's like no, they had people like man. Actually, I'll go back to a story that'll blow your mind. But continuing on with this, like they came in and landed in the Yucatan. They meet the Mayans. The Mayans hate the Aztecs. They're like, yeah, we'll help you we'll overthrow those guys. Everyone thinks that like Hernan Cortez with 400 guys were just like so awesome. They were able to overthrow 1 million people in the Aztec Empire.
Right.
And it's like, no, they had a lot of people that did not like the Aztecs on their side.
Yeah.
Another like common thing, people are like, oh, Cortez, when he landed, he burned the ships to tell his men there's no going back. He didn't burn the ships. He disassembled the ships, brought them inland, rebuilt the ships in the lake around Tenochtitlan, and used them as naval support to actually like threaten the palace. Like they did.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
They did brilliant military things. These people are not stupid. Yeah, they were
No.
misguided. They were definitely misguided by their values of the age. Like
Yeah.
we look at them as primitive now, not just the people, but even the conquistadors. We look at them as maybe primitive now. It's like, oh, look at them, their religious fervor and things like that. But no, they did brilliant military things.
Oh yeah. I mean, the one thing that vexed me is Oak Island. Like when you talk about how what's his name disassembled the ship and built it in the lake, it's like that is a crazy feat. Like if you see like how big some of the timbers were that built those ships that crossed the Atlantic, we're talking about some serious engineering and grunt work just even I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine like just taking apart a boat for like 20 people, that like the kind of sizes they had in Egypt, like those kind of smaller raft boats. Like I couldn't imagine doing that, let alone a ship. Going to like Easter Island, like the engineering of whatever that those shafts were that had these lumber and these water traps and these layers and the depths they were digging in, uh, geological composition, like soil composition that you wouldn't really want to dig in, like the engineering feats of these people way back, where the kind of the idea is that they were primitive or they didn't know much, is like, oh, you try doing some of that.
Yeah, no, nobody, nobody's studying that stuff now.
Yeah, I
Not
know.
your
Like
people.
the what?
I'm just saying, like, not your average person, but like these people had to not only be like cognizant ship, like they had to be sailors, and they also had to be able to be shipbuilders.
Yeah.
I mean, even like a movie like Master and Commander. I don't know if you've ever seen Master and
Oh yeah.
Commander.
Yeah.
Probably one of the best historical movies realistically ever made. That gives you a good idea of like when these people had like you got into naval warfare and your ship got shot full of holes and stuff like that. Like you had to repair it. You're halfway across the world. You didn't put it in port.
Yeah.
Like you have fire control before it was fire control. You know what I mean? Like you're on a wooden ship. You have resin. You go to an island. You cut down some trees and you hatch your boat.
That's crazy.
I mean, you've got like these days you'd need engineers. You'd have like skilled laborers. You have unions. You have all this stuff. You know what I mean? You'd have all this stuff going on. And it's like, no.
I'm on my coffee break, man. Yeah, things have gotten like we've advanced in these really specific ways of like mass production and mass, like we can put up steel buildings really fast, these kind of things, but there's like there is definitely a lost art to stone, like masonry and woodwork. Like I've told you before, the house that my folks are in was like pre 1850, and the some of the woodwork in the subfloor is still there, the stonework still there, and it's more stable than the addition on the house that was built in like the 80s. Like it like it's not going anywhere. Now the addition on the 80s edition, that might have to be worked on down the road, but not the main stuff. Yeah, I just don't get it. I don't get how they knew some of this stuff, and I guess they had to. Sometimes I don't understand how we didn't go from like temporary dwellings to like massive stone structures in a relative short period of time. But where there's a will, there's a way, I suppose. But there's like two mysteries that are still bothering me, and that I've already mentioned Oak Island, the level of sophistication that went on that island for who knows what is under the ground there. And then the other one is if anyone that's listening can help me locate it, I'm trying to find more information on it, but it's the Siberian domes. I want to know more about those, because there's several reports of people going up that were exploring, hunting, all of this stuff. There were sketches made of these domes that were submerged in kind of marshy areas up in there. And but the consistent reports was anytime anybody got close to them, they'd get sick and leave. And so I want to know. So if anybody knows anything about the Siberian domes, please.
These like earthen domes, or are they like?
No, they were like these smooth, I don't know what material they were made out of, but they were these smooth domes that were semi-submerged, and as time went on, they kept sinking. They kept more and more so. So I don't know what they were. I don't know if they were like just some structures that somebody built like a long time ago. but whatever they were sinking. And the most modern expedition that I know that was specifically trying to find that, it was a whole bunch of guys that went backpacking with some scientists. They wanted to get like an accurate measuring of if they could find them. So they found the area, they found them kind of the marshes. But there was this one evening where they set up tent, and they woke up like really early morning, and one of the guys was like so sick, he was lethargic, and they had to leave because he was sick. So they left, and it's still like this big question, and there's very little information on it. But there's a few people that are aware of these things, and I just don't know. I don't know what they are, or why they would be that far up north, or like the places they were. I don't know. It goes back to like, I do feel like we had like several iterations of human civilization advancing and then getting reset due to natural disaster, whatever, whether it be asteroid, volcano, flooding, all these different crazy events that we know happened. And then we probably did like what we're talking about with the stonemasonry and the crazy engineering that they were able to do with very simple tools. Like you get to that level, and civilization advances, and then you have some cataclysm that resets everything and bottlenecks us, and then we restart. I do think that that's happened several times on this planet, specifically with humans. I'm not saying they had like flying cars or anything. I'm just saying, like, I do think we did reach certain levels of a different type of advanced technology, like whether it be they figured out how to cut and set rock really, really good, and they were like artisans at it, and then something happened, and then we lost all that information, and we dig up stuff, and we're like, how the fuck did they do this? Uh so I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what your take is on that, but man, those Siberian domes, like the Chinese pyramids, now the copper pipes are plaguing me. So
Yeah.
got a lot of
You're
research to
welcome
do.
for that. Well, yeah, they in Native American tradition too, which most notably the Hopi, I think, have the best articulated way of saying that. I believe they say we're in the fourth world and the fifth world is coming,
Oh
and
man,
that's
another
their
reset.
yeah, that's their whole. I guess you call it a doomsday prophecy. It's not really, but yeah, their reset. They according to most of the lore, we've been in multiple like stages of, I guess, yeah, uh, re-evolution, I guess is the best way to say it, instead of evolution. But yeah, we've been reset a few times, and
Yeah.
they describe it as like the new world. We've been in this world, now we're in this world. So we're in the fourth, we're going into the fifth.
Well, there are reports of ancient man being aware of solar cycles really well. And that sometimes okay, so there's a few terrifying scenarios I'm going to throw out. One is asteroid from the Taurid meteor stream. Like if we get, because all that rock that we pass through once every that thousand or more years. I'm terrible at numbers right now, but like let's say even if it's once every 10,000 years, I don't remember, but we do pass close or through every now and again on a long enough timeline. So you have like the impact that they think that really did do the most damage to the dinosaurs was the one that they recently found. I say recent, probably like a decade or more, but when they were doing surveying in the Gulf of Mexico, they found a huge asteroidal impact that's very ancient and would have caused a lot of North American damage in terms of weather patterns, just like the sky blackening essentially, and amongst other things, fires and the crazy tidal waves and stuff. So then, and they found it by doing like radar surveys, underwater lidar, or whatever they do to survey where they're going to drill. And then, so we got asteroids to worry about. Then we've got coronal ejections from the sun to worry about, which does seem to be on a relative, according to what we've seen in geology and whatnot. It seems to happen in intervals. So like the last bad one we had that we in recent memory to humans is it was, I believe it was in the 1800s when we had telegraph, where there was a solar flare that caused like a magnetic disruptions strong enough for it to overcharge the telegraph wires and catch telegraph paper on fire. There were buildings that caught on fire because they were wired up and stuff like that. So that happened in the 1800s. So imagine if we had a similar scenario with all the cables and stuff we have in the sky now. Like, and all of the modern houses that are built are just dry rock and and 2x4 construction. It's just wood. I mean, the amount of damage that would cause is unknown. It would be bad. Then you have the poles switching. So we do know that over time the magnetic poles switch or flip, which when that happens, there's a temporary kind of shields down mode where our Van Allen belt and magnetic outer atmosphere isn't as strong, so we get pelted by solar radiation more. And then then geological stuff like earthquakes, volcanoes, crazy anything that happens in the ocean that's magnificent enough it caused tidal waves that take out coasts. So we've got like a lot of things to worry about, but most of them stem from something that the solar system is doing. Like it's some outside influence that disrupts stuff here, and then the world is just reset, and you have enough humans that basically cockroach and survive. And you go into parts of Europe and you find these places that were specifically carved out, and there's some in North America where they were underground cities that were not like catacombs for dead people. They were dwelling places. And it's like maybe they knew something, maybe they were like anticipating something, and then over the years it becomes prophecy and that kind of thing, or legend. But it kind of alerts me whenever you see the super rich like making these bunkers all over the place, like in modern day. I don't know. It seems like the sun is on a relative clock where it does something, and our Earth is on a relative clock where sometimes our magnetic poles do some trickery. And it's very possible that Antarctica was very lush at one point. I know that they have found the oldest known map of Antarctica has like drawings of animals and trees on it. And it was when they were charting through like down the tip of South America and all of this stuff. And one of the older, have you seen that map by any chance?
I've seen a lot of old cartography with stuff like that on it.
Yeah. Well, there's one specifically that shows Antarctica with life on it and stuff going on it. And but the kicker is that it's thought to be right now it's a very, very old map, but it's thought to be a copy of an even older map that we've lost. But this copy of it survived. So, there's stuff like that. I mean, it would not surprise me if they found some, intelligently designed structures under the ice shelf at some point. I mean, we all know that it's very difficult for anybody but, joint scientific and military efforts between countries to go down there and do stuff. And they say it's because they want to keep everything unpolluted, because they're doing ice core samples to understand the makeup of our planet, so we know what's going on atmospherically, like from a historical timeline, and tap into water that's ancient to figure out what its composition is, which makes sense. You don't want to have a bunch of people running around there contaminating that. But it's all weird. It's all very weird, and it worries me too, because like what if the poles shifted and Tennessee became the next ice cap? I'd be screwed. All my plans, like a bunker doesn't. I would have a whole nother layer of the bunker I'd have to get out. It'd be bad.
I'm trying to think of what the opposite side of the world would be from there.
Yeah, like India. What are we, like directly under Tennessee is some India somewhere in there?
Yeah, either that or you'll be some random place in the middle of the Pacific.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it might be. I'm trying to. It's been a while since I've had like a globe in front.
But yeah, the last major coronal mass ejection actually was in 2012, in July of 2012. A lot of people don't realize that. That's
The
a
Mayans knew.
yeah, that's the theory. That's the whole theory.
Yeah.
And people are saying that maybe CERN, what we were doing was actually trying to reset tragedy, basically. That
Oh, make a new timeline.
Yeah, because had that like, so that coronal mass ejection happened in June. It was in the spring, summer, late spring, early summer. And I mean, for me, June is summer all the time because it's so hot where I live. But
Yeah.
Happened in June, I think. And what happened was the coronal mass ejection happened, and it should have hit us. And they're saying that something knocked it off course, something blocked it, and we don't know what blocked it. We have no clue what blocked it. It should have hit us, and it should have been like, it should have been it. Should have been game over. Something stopped it. Had it hit, it would have caused obviously mass devastation, nuclear winter kind of stuff, things like that. I'm saying nuclear winter. Obviously, it's not a nuclear thing, but
Yeah.
the same thing. Clouding skies, everything changes. And people said that their projections for how long humanity would have survived would have been about 6 months, which would have put it at December 21st, 2012, which is when the Mayan calendar ended. So had whatever blocked it, I don't know what blocked it, whatever changed it, we don't know. But had that coronal mass ejection happened in June and hit us, I mean, it did happen. We know the sun had a coronal mass ejection in June. Had it actually hit Earth like it was supposed to have, then Earth, well, all life and human life would have ended in December 21st, 2012, like the Mayan calendar said. So we don't know what stopped it, what deflected it, what changed our trajectory to where we didn't get hit by it. But either they were really, really close with a prediction and they were just off by minutes, or something intervened.
Interesting. So with the whole CERN thing, it's not that they did something out there. It's that the theory is that they created a new timeline, and that's why we have Mandela effects.
Yeah, that they probably like crossed us into the next nearest multiverse. Basically, we just jumped over.
What happened to that Earth?
I don't know.
What I wonder. I want to know what happened to we took the place of.
Like I said, it's probably a lonely, cold planet right now.
That's very creepy. I was trying to think what I was doing in 2012. I think I was talking a lot about this from like to an ex-girlfriend, and I think I made her cry. I was like talking about all the possible scenarios for the why 2012 everything could end. I don't know if coronal mass ejection was on the list, but I do remember her in tears at one point. So that's what I was doing.
God, 2012, I was super lost. I had just gotten out of 2010. I had just gotten out of being a traveling touring musician, and I was starting to use my history degree for a life. Getting into that. That's what I was doing in 2012.
Yeah. I do know I have a Berenstain, whatever, book in my parents' attic somewhere.
I've got some somewhere too, and I really need to find them.
I always remember Berenstain. That's the way I remember it. This stain thing, when people started talking about it, I was like, what? I was that bothered me because it was always Steen, not Stain, but whatever.
Yeah, a lot of Mandela effects I get because they're easy. I mean, I'm a big fan of magic too. Like not magic as in like actual magic, but like, illusionist. Like,
oh yeah.
So like Penn and Teller, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated with sleight of hand and mentalism and things like that, and cold reading people and things like that. And so I understand how it's really easy, like Fruit Loops, Looney Tunes, things like that. I can understand those Mandela effects because your brain naturally fills in the gaps for things like that you never really paid attention to. Like, how is Fruit Loops spelled? See, you can't even answer me immediately. You got to think about it.
Yeah. LLLOOP. Because
Yeah.
the fruit part is easy. It's the loop is the question, right?
Is the fruit part easy? Is it?
The fruit part is easy.
Is it fruit?
It's the loop. It's the loop. Are you saying the LOUPE or LOOP?
No, it's Fruit Loops FROOTS. Fruit.
Oh, you're saying that part of the word.
Fruit Loops or FRUIT, like fruit, like the fruit.
I'm having to think about it too much. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's how they do with like Looney Tunes. Is it TUNES or is it TOONS? Tunes as in cartoons, or tunes as in Looney Tunes? Like
you're tuning in.
Yeah.
Oh, that is weird. I've also heard the little squiggle on the Ford logo, was like a thing, and people were wondering what happened to it. And I believe some guy in the middle of the nowhere, like the car that grass had grown up through it, but he found one with or without the squiggle. I forget what the argument was there, but I know there was argument there. But I don't know.
Yeah, there's a ton of those. I think a lot of them though are like just, I don't know. Some of them are weird. Some of them you just misremember things easy.
Yeah, I agree with that. People like our brains compress memory to save on storage. Like you get the gist of something, box it up, and it's like embedded, and then you just keep moving forward. Like you're not going to remember every grain of detail unless you have like a freak memory. But even the guys that do like that hyper memorization stuff, that where they filmed them like doing all this crazy stuff, that I believe they've talked about it's a technique on basically getting like the finer points of something and then compressing it into like an association or like an idea, and then moving to the next one. And then when you recall it, it's almost like the reason why you remember like words easier when there's a tune to it. It's like the same kind of process. Yeah, that makes sense. Human memory is messy.
Yeah, there's different ways to do it, and they say there's no such thing as a true eidetic, which eidetic memory is someone who remembers absolutely everything.
Yeah.
There are tricks. I don't know if I have it because of studying history and stuff, but I remember random facts, dates, things like that. Obviously, I can remember phone numbers from people that I knew in 7th grade and things like that.
Yeah.
But your brain will have to push certain things out. Like it would actually be a nightmare to be a real vampire, because if you had immortality and you remembered everything, you would go insane. Like you would actually be senile. Like that's how dementia happens. Is like actually there's a correlation with people that have like really good memory with showing early signs of dementia. Like you're more likely to have that later in life.
So your brain has to kick something out, and with dementia, okay,
can't just keep all that up there.
So basically with dementia, because I remember my grandmother before she passed, she had dementia, and she would mention stuff like, I was little then, but she would be like talking about these things like, oh, you need to close the gates, the cows will get out, because she was remembering back being on the farm as a kid. And so I guess the thing that was being pushed out was like the link and chronological order of all these memories rather than the memories themselves.
Yeah, and there's still a lot of study in that, but they start to look at stuff like that for signs of like connections to either dementia or just blanked out
dementia. Yeah, it's interesting. Alzheimer's is an interesting subject because the whole thing with amyloid plaque. Basically, your brain, when it thinks, is creating byproducts, and one of them is like amyloid beta plaques or whatever. and it's just a byproduct of neurons firing. So one of the risks with speeding that up, like people that take coke or methamphetamines consistently throughout their life, they're speeding up like all that synapse firing and creating more amyloid beta like plaque buildup byproduct than a normal person would. So that the accumulative effect would be these kind of neurotoxic things that start to destroy those connections of memories and this and that when you're older. Same thing like when the brain, I believe what their current thing about sleep is, when you're sleeping, your brain stem swells and creates this certain type of pressure where the amyloid plaque is being cleared. Like your brain has a process for clearing it out and all that kind of thing. And the other thing is like people that don't get a lot of sleep. There's a correlation between that, dementia, and Alzheimer's, and all that kind of thing, where the same effect, that all those byproducts are causing more harm in the long run. Yeah, I was trying to think of how we got from Wartime Cryptids to this.
I wasn't even going to bring us back, but yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know, that the vampire thing is fascinating, because I like those movies where punishment for a vampire amongst other vampires is just like it being locked eternally in a coffin. And
Isolation. Yeah.
yeah, but they're alive forever, and they just come out, if they get released, they're absolutely insane.
Yeah, they're mad at that point because they're just
Yeah,
nothing
1,000
but
years
their own.
of black isolation would probably do it for me too.
Yeah.
Well, sorry folks, we didn't stick on the Wartime Cryptids for too long, but it was a fun conversation. I mean, do you have anything else you want to add to the game? Is called Ad Infinitum, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I feel like that would be I mean, it's been a while since there's been like a revival of survival horror. Like there's some indie developers that have made some kind of old school resurrections of like Resident Evil type games, um with like fixed cameras. So they've done pretty good. But like I know that the new Resident Evils are coming out and everything. But if there's like specifically a World War One cryptid trench nightmare game, I'm looking into that.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be like Alien Isolation, but with psychological element.
Yeah.
So I mean, like
I
obviously there's a psychological element to being scared regardless, but this is going to be because it bounces back and forth between the guy in the trenches and his life at home, like he's remembering it. So I think there's going to be a deep psychological kind of look into it also, and I think that's going to be fascinating. So hopefully, it comes out and everything gets all the funding it needs, and it's legit. So
Yeah. Do you know what studio is doing it? Is this a indie like Kickstarter kind of thing, or is
it
this
was
real?
originally a Kickstarter thing, but I mean it's coming out like it's on current gen stuff. It looks really good. Definitely check out the trailers for it. It's all in German and subtitled, so that makes it even better because it's very authentic.
Yeah. I mean, there's good stuff coming out of Kickstarter, like um System Shock remake. That's how
Yeah.
that happened. Now I've been a backer for that for years. They keep like, oh, it's about to release, it's about, and it hasn't, but they're saying this year, like they're gonna push it out the door. And what I heard was, in the early development stages, they basically kicked everything out and restarted with the new Unreal Engine. So because it was simpler and everything worked better, and so they basically had to restart it. But they sent out a message to all the people and were like, hey, this is happening. But it made me play the original one with the enhanced edition on the GOG platform, and it's good. Like the original game is fun.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's played Bioshock, obviously System Shock's the spiritual success or predecessor to
Yeah.
it. And System Shock 2 is one of the best games ever made. So, I mean, I hope they I was kind of hoping with the System Shock remake it was going to be 1 and 2 kind of combined into one game.
Oh yeah.
I was wishing they would just do that because Shodan is kind of like one of the best villains in video game history. So
Maybe with this, because I know that it's pretty popular right now. Like once it's released, a lot of people are going to buy it. Hopefully that will translate to a 2, but eventually. Um, the last really so when I was a kid, my sister got me this game for my birthday. It was a point and click game, and it's called Titanic: An Adventure Out of Time, and it is a very it will like suck you into the storyline. It's so good. Basically, you're this guy, because what you were saying about the guy remembering in this other game and you back in the trenches, it's kind of similar to that. It's a guy that is during a war is remembering like this mission that was on the Titanic, and so you basically are running around the Titanic in this weird 2.5D game where you're knocking on passengers' doors and you're getting this storyline from like crew members, and then you go out and meet someone in this weird workout room and she's like, well, I heard that he did this and here's a piece of paper, and then you go and you're basically, it's like a time travel game where the Titanic was sabotaged and you have to like correct it for the timeline or whatever.
not a Silent Mobius game, is it?
I don't know who made it. It's a big what do you call it when they have those graphics where it's basically, it's not like polygons, but it was like a green globe with lines. That's the main logo I remember.
It's gonna be later than the one I'm thinking of, I think so.
They
Silent Mobius games is like a detective kind of game thing, but
okay.
he also has to like fight ghosts and stuff on the Titan. And
it's like Myst. It's kind of like Myst,
okay,
where you're like moving around all jankily and then you move forward and click on stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I decided like GOG is a cool platform because I believe it's a subsidiary of Steam. Steam somehow owns I don't know if it's called GOG or GOG Galaxy.
I always heard it's GOG, but
yeah. Anyway, so they have a really good system because it's digital rights movement free. Like you don't have all this software running in the background making sure it's legit. Like it's games where they let you just purchase it and that's that. But the cool thing about them is they have a ton of games from like the 80s and 90s that they've ported over to modern systems really well. Most of it is mouse and keyboard, but some of it has decent controller emulation.
I just missed the early Hex War, like mil sims. That's the military history nerd in me.
What those words I don't recognize. What is it?
So like Hex War kind of things are like you have a battlefield with like hexagonal movement ability.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you remember like the actual board game Axis and Allies?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that, but in a video game setting, and then you can put any war you want, like Napoleonic War, Civil War.
Almost like Civilization.
Yeah, similar, but you don't have to build anything.
Yeah.
You have your army as it was. Like, you can either do it in a historical setting or you can do it in a like fake, like a what if setting.
Okay.
Like I had ones like I had the Civil War General series, which was 1 and 2, Civil War General 1 and 2, and you basically could go through the entire campaign, go through the whole war. It would take you forever, but you can pick certain battles, like certain days of certain battles, and you basically have the numbers that they had with the actual units and stuff like that. And it's a hex war where you maneuver, and you can have the AI respond to you accordingly, or you can have the AI do what it did historically, and then try to.
Wow.
So like things like that.
That's the thing about old games. There's a lot of people that are younger that are missing out because they assume like they were just like janky games, but there was a lot of like detail there, like a Daggerfall or just the custom, like, okay, fine, the graphics are atrocious, but part of me likes it because it's nostalgic, but it also looks cool. I mean, there's a whole revival like Dusk on PC, where it's basically they're intentionally making them look like old games, but they have faster gameplay with all the modern mechanics. But you like there are games with the level of custom, I can't even say that word. You can customize it to such a degree. It's so fun, or the details in it are so fun. I was listening to a guy that was doing some theory on like video game theory, and one of the things he was saying is like around like the mid to late 90s when they made games like Thief, like the original Thieves. One of the reasons those things still hold up today is, and sometimes are better, is because like in Thief you were like given like a piece of paper with a drawn out map of the map that you're in, and you had to navigate and figure out how to get there. Now you have like waypoints and like a radar, and you just basically just copy and paste move to these waypoints. And like imagine if they made Red Dead Redemption 2, but you had to like traverse the land with like an old school map and there was no like radar system. I think I would like that better. Like the amount, because that whole map is already laced with all these mysterious things you just come across.
Mm-hmm.
How fun would it be if you had no waypoint markers or radar, and just a map that you had to keep going back to kind of like figure out where you were? That would be so fun.
Yeah, if you if you had to navigate, which by the way, you say all the weird stuff on there. Yeah, there's a lot of Easter eggs you can kind of like stumble upon. But I love the journal system in that, where it's just like you fill out the journal, every time you come across the weird stuff. Yeah,
my favorite thing or my favorite two things coming across was the serial killer that was like butchering people, and you'd find all these body parts every now and then with like a he left his calling card. And the other one was you randomly stumble across this lady that's like excavating dinosaur bones.
Yeah. Yeah, my favorite Red Dead Redemption Easter eggs are
Hey buddy.
she just came in here. The Heaven's Gate Easter egg. I don't know if you got that one or not. There's a and I forget what area it's in because it's been so long since I played it, but there is a like a cabin, almost like a schoolhouse, and you walk into it and all the people are laying on tables with sheets over them. And if you go in between like, it has to be a very specific time, like between like 1:30 and 2, whatever, an alien ship will come over and like a green light will shine down. And you can run outside and try to take a look at it, and it'll fly off before you really ever get a full glimpse of it.
That's so cool.
That's one of the best ones. And I love the ghost that's down in the bayou. That one's extremely hard to get. There's a ghost,
well, yeah,
a ghost about a woman that was killed because I don't know, something about her lover. Her parents didn't want her to marry her lover or whatever, and she's the ghost of the bayou, and she's very hard to find. And if you can get that like small window and see her, that's a really cool one. And then the Vampire of Saint Denis. You never got that one. That's the best one. Oh, it's so good.
So you've seen like YouTube videos of it?
No, I've got it.
Oh, you did?
He killed me. I didn't kill him. I've seen YouTube videos. You can kill him and get some kind of weapon or some kind of outfit or something from him, but he killed me. I didn't shoot him in time.
Now I know what I'm doing tonight.
Yeah, you gotta like find 5 different vampire victims that you find in Saint Denis, and then he'll be in an alleyway, and yeah, just make sure you pull the trigger, because I was so happy I found him that I didn't realize how fast he was. So yeah, kill him for me.
I will kill him for you. I'm. You know what I'm worried about? I'm worried that Red Dead 2 will be like Rockstar's last really great game. I know like some stuff leaked on Grand Theft Auto. I mean, first off, they were like testing stuff. People were all like, "Oh, it's just they were just like animations of them testing things." I don't know. I'm worried that we're getting like the Grand Theft Auto was never as detailed as Red Dead 2. So I don't know if it's a different team of guys within the house. I don't know.
I mean, even story-wise, Red Dead 1 is better than any of the Grand Theft Autos in my mind.
It was pretty good. I have some fond memories of one.
And
Man. Okay. What is the other? Okay. This is my problem with open world games. I will never finish the main storyline. I will just be wandering around looking for stuff and doing random side stuff. Like I had a friend that was really into Skyrim, and I was really into Skyrim, and he watched me play one day, and he's like, you're not even out of what's the first town you go? Uh
a White
White
Run.
yeah, White Run. So I had already gotten a house, gotten a maiden, gotten all of this stuff, and I had only like gone like 10% of the main storyline. He's like, how did you even do this? I was going all around uh collecting stuff and leveling up in these weird ways. But that's the fun of it. It's like, just if they keep making really detailed, super big open world full of stuff, like, I'll be happy. But I'm worried we're getting more towards just really good graphics. Like Cyberpunk is a kind of a good example. Like, it's this big open world. It was clearly released too early. I mean, they just weren't done with it. But it's if like the world was more interactable, if I could just go into these buildings or just like open doors, and like everything is just so fixed, like it's pretty to look at, but it's like you can't interact with it. It drives me nuts.
Yeah, definitely there. Like, and I still don't hate it. I love that game, but
Cyberpunk, yeah, Cyberpunk is fun, but now this is the one hope that is never dies with me. The modding scene is unreal. Like, it used to be like, oh, that's pretty cool. Now it's crazy. Like, you can do whatever with the right mods. Like, I remember modding. I modded uh Fallout 3 so hard. It was the funnest thing. There were all these extra levels, there was all these extra tools, all these extra Easter eggs, all kinds of ridiculousness. It got to where it was so burdensome on my computer that I was having crashes and glitches that I had never seen before. Like Bethesda's already glitchy enough. It was you couldn't play more than 30 minutes and there would be like some game-breaking glitch, but it was fun.
and next week, folks, we'll talk about simulation theory.
Exactly. Yeah, like there was this one day, it was something ridiculous. You know how there's all cross brandings these days where like Dorito flavored popcorn or whatever. Like, I'm just like making some or like when Lay's made like chicken and waffles
Yeah,
chips, and
yeah.
but there was some weird brand. Me and my girlfriend were walking through Kroger, and it was like this cross, like it was some weird brand mixed with another brand. I want to say it was something like Cheeto popcorn or just something. And our whole thing was like, simulations breaking down. It was like when things are getting too weird, where things are like the oddest things are blending together, it's like, yeah, the simulation, or it's starting to crash and glitch.
We got flaming hot Cheeto celery.
Yeah, exactly. Just some bizarre thing. I wish I remember what it was, because it was truly like, what? Uh Maybe it was like some like toiletry item that was scented like food. It was something that bizarre.
Oh
That
yeah.
was like what are we doing here?
Personally, I think
They've
about that whenever I see bacon vodka. I don't get that at all. I'm like, why?
where did that ever happen? Did some redneck like mix the bacon grease with his freshly distilled pot accidentally, and it became a thing? Like, how does that even happen?
Because they are diametrically opposed. Bacon um has enzymes in it that break down alcohol. So like
Really?
yeah, so if you drink vodka, one of the best things you can eat afterward is bacon because it breaks down alcohol. And so I find that fascinating that they want a bacon flavored alcohol. Maybe that's because it's making you want bacon. Maybe they're helping you out.
Maybe I've always heard a hangover cure is like a big fatty breakfast with bacon and eggs.
Eggs, yes. Eggs, yes. So cytosine and eggs will break down alcohol. Um, lysine or lysergic acid. That will break down alcohol. So Sprite's very good for you. Also, the sugar in it will help your blood sugar and stuff like that. And then bacon, I forget what it is that's in that actually breaks down the alcohol. But that's bacon, eggs, and a Sprite will do you good.
Wow.
And milk, believe it or not, skim milk or like low fat milk, that'll hydrate you better than just water alone. So that's
that makes sense.
And that's your best breakfast right there, honestly.
Yeah.
If you're trying to fight a hangover, that is. But
yeah, and throw in like a liquid IV and a big thing of ice water. Like my problem is that now just thinking about alcohol gives me a hangover. Like my body is like expecting it. Like I just don't drink anymore. That like if like the rare occasion where it's like, all right, this is a drinking night. I already start feeling that weird like body feel, and then the headache comes on, and it's like a psychosomatic response to like what my body is anticipating. So it's just not fun anymore.
Yeah.
But if I ever have a good old, if That's Even Weird ever has a drinking show, I'll be sure to stock up on bacon and ginger root. And
I know y'all have mentioned that a few times, and I'm always like, oh God, we gotta.
Yeah, I know it would be fun for when we record, and then afterwards it would be awful. But anyway, well, folks, I'm glad you turned him to Wartime Cryptids. Last time I'm going to say that. Just make sure to check out all our social media. Check out our TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and I mean we're all over the place. And if you have any comments about today's episode, just go ahead and leave a comment in the comment section. And remember, we don't want stuff that's normal. We want stuff that's effing weird.